Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lex Infinity podcast hosted by the BPP Manchester Law Society. We are delighted to be joined by Ms. Jasmine Gratton, who at the age of 21 became the youngest woman ever to pass the New York bar exam. A trailblazer in her own right, she attained a score of more than 90%, despite having to sit for the grueling test with COVID-related complications last year. Jasmine is slated to be admitted to the New York State Court of Appeals this year, as well as the Connecticut Bar. She is currently an associate attorney at Whitmere IP Group, Connecticut, where she handles both contentious and non-contentious IP work. Having traveled and lived in many countries, Jasmine speaks French, Italian, and Spanish. Today, we speak to Jasmine about her academic journey, the life of an attorney across the Atlantic, and her interests beyond law. Thank you for joining us, Jasmine.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today.
We are privileged to have you on board today, Jasmine. So let us start by, tell us more about your background and where did you grow up?
So I grew up a little bit all over the place. My mom worked for the United Nations. So I was born in Australia, October 99, and I was there for about 6 to 8 months, and we moved to India. And I lived in Delhi for 4 years. And then after that, we moved to Florence, Italy. And I was there for 5 years. And in 2009, 2010, we moved to the US, specifically Connecticut, to a town that's actually about 20 minutes away from where I'm working right now. So I feel like I've come full circle. And in 2013, I decided to go to boarding school, and I started at the Hotchkiss School, which is also in Connecticut. It is in the northwest corner of Connecticut, middle of nowhere, town of about 200 people. And then at 17, I started at the University of Bristol Law School in England. And then I decided to move back to the US, specifically to New York, to do my LLM at Fordham University School of Law. And I decided to pursue an LLM in intellectual property and information technology law. And I just wrapped that up this past winter. So that would be the winter of 2021.
Well, Abid, thank you. So obviously from your account, you have traveled around the world and you have seen loads of stuff. So I suppose if we could just move on to what prompted you to embark on a career in law. I suppose every aspiring legal practitioner would have their own story. So it would be great to hear what prompted you to become an attorney.
Yeah, so for me, it really began when I was in high school at Hotchkiss, when I was in, I think it was my second year there. And I was taking a philosophy class where we would, every month or so, have some sort of debate on some sort of philosophical or moral issue. And I found myself really engaged by the process, like the research behind it, and then also the actual arguments and presenting different ways of working around something. And also, I was really interested in presenting arguments that I didn't necessarily agree with. And I just found that to be really engaging and something that I really wanted to do more of. And my professor at the time, who is actually the person who wrote my moral attestation for the New York bar, he said, at one point it was some sort of debate we were doing, and I tried to keep arguing, and he said, "Gratton, you're not in law school yet." And so it sort of made me realize, hey, maybe this is the way I want to go. Maybe I do want to go to law school. And I wasn't certain what kind of lawyer I wanted to be. I thought I wanted to do human rights law just because it was something I had been exposed to a lot growing up with my mom working at the United Nations. And I thought it would be interesting. And I thought law school could be a really great stepping stone to whatever I wanted next. And I decided to go to law school in England because, as I'm sure you're familiar, in the US, you have to do a bachelor's before you go to law school. And in England, you can just go straight to law school. So I just thought this was a great opportunity for me to get my legal education when I wanted to get it, which was right after high school.
Wow, I mean, yeah, that I suppose resonates with a lot of people, because uh, you know the fact that you have been very argumentative since your high school days sort of pointed you in the right direction. So I suppose for you, taking the law degree is a natural progression, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people that I talked to when I was at Bristol, they didn't really know what they were doing, but some of them did like an A level in law, but
Hmm.
for the most part, it was just they thought it was a really great stepping stone to what they wanted next,
Hmm.
whether that be going into politics or public policy or really anything. But really, for a lot of people, they just liked debate class, and they thought if you like debate, then you must like being a lawyer, which I don't think is actually how it works out for most people who get into law. But it's if you like to argue, being a lawyer is certainly one way of being able to do that as a career.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. So you mentioned that you completed your law degree at the University of Bristol. So thereafter, you studied for the New York bar exam, and obviously, you completed your LLM in intellectual property the following year at Fordham University School of Law. So I suppose my question to you is, what drew you to legal practice in the United States?
Yeah, so specifically for IP, definitely the US is a pretty critical market for it. Not just because a lot of consumer brands are based here, but also because the US Intellectual Property Office here, which is called the USPTO, they really are at the forefront of a lot of the legal change around trademarks, especially. And they have very strict rules compared to some other countries. So I really wanted to explore US IP. So when I was at Bristol, I did an IP course in my final year, and I also completed my dissertation on trademark law in the European Union. And I felt like I had a really good sense of what European trademark law was like, but I was missing a very key legal market, which was the US. So I decided to embark on this LLM with the intention of really just broadening my IP horizons. The idea wasn't I didn't want to get a job here and stay. I That wasn't initially my path. I wasn't really sure what I would do. I definitely wanted to do the bar because timing wise it worked out. I didn't have a training contract. It made sense. I thought it would make me more marketable. And then from there, I was able to sort of find my way into an IP firm where they only do IP, and it's actually exactly what I wanted the whole time. So it worked out well. But my intention to study US law was really what made it that I'm now practicing US law.
I see. That's really interesting because personally for me, I did take up the IP law module when I was in university, but unfortunately, I didn't quite resonate with the principles of it. I suppose for me, I'm more inclined towards other disciplines of commercial law.
Mm-hmm.
I've attempted to really undertake a lot of research on important aspects of IP. But for me, it seems like my understanding of IP, didn't go really far. So, let me just tell the audience that I probably struggled a lot with the IP module in particular when I was in law school. So, I
Yeah,
so
I mean
I
it's a
was.
challenging one. Absolutely. I think for those of you who are still students and trying to find like an area of law you're interested in, I was lucky, but I also didn't find mine until the final year. So I think if you are going to pursue one area of law, pick the one that when you're taking a class you want to learn more about. Like I'll be completely honest with commercial law when I was doing it, I was a bit over my head, but now there are pieces of that that are coming in useful to me. And I remember doing company law in my second year, and I got like a 45 on that exam. I did so poorly. So you don't have to be good at every single module. You don't have to even enjoy the ones that you think you did, but you will fall into something that works eventually. And I remember being so scared that I wasn't going to find an area of law that I liked and that I was just going to graduate and have no idea what I was going to do. But I did eventually find IP, which I'm really glad to have done, and it did happen in my final year. So for those of you who are in your second year and still aren't sure, like you'll get there.
So those are the words of wisdom from Jasmine. And so to those that are listening, make sure that you heed that advice because it's going to turn out to be a great advice. So Jasmine, you have experienced the best of both worlds, I suppose, having had legal education both in the UK and the US. So I suppose my question to you then is, how does a qualification from the United States add value to your CV and your profile? Because obviously, to a certain extent, the legal system in the UK and the US is quite different. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a different qualification uh, would be detrimental or anything like that. In fact, I think it's going to add value because I think the legal profession right now, it's very big on diversity and things like that. So I suppose if you could just give us an account on how a different qualification could add value to our profile.
Yeah, so I definitely think that having the New York bar on your CV or really any bar exam, it just really shows that not only are you aware of legal principles in that jurisdiction, but you're also able to dedicate yourself and study towards something that's really not very easy. And it shows that you're able to really wrap your head around new concepts. You can learn on the spot, you're self driven. It really shows a firm everything that they need from you. And firms are always looking for that. Like if you look at any application, they're asking like, when did you show perseverance or when did you dedicate yourself to something? And it's one very clear example of putting your mind towards something that's not easy. And it is world recognized, and it is something that people know is not easy. And so that I think really does add value. It is challenging. It's a difficult exam, but I think that coming from a common law country, you do have a distinct advantage over those who are from civil law countries. And so I do promote this path because it's a great alternative if you don't have a training contract lined up or if you don't have a pupillage ready and you don't know what to do. Rather than sitting around waiting, maybe applying for like LLMs or throwing in applications, like do this, because then you can go back to your applications with something more. Say that you've been able to pass this really difficult legal exam in the US, and now you understand American legal principles, and you're able to bring that into the work you do. And specifically for IP, since it's so cross-jurisdictional, having that background is really critical. Like I feel that every day in my work, that there are components of what I learned in the bar exam that do come up, and having that sort of mental structure and the ability to write memos and that sort of thing, it is really important to the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose that's correct, and it applies to other areas of law as well. So I think if we do a simple search on LinkedIn, I think an increasing amount of you can see from the profiles of various people on LinkedIn that a lot of them are actively pursuing a career as an international lawyer because of things like globalization and every everyone around the world, seems more interconnected than ever. So moving on, like I'd like to ask you, how does it feel to know that you have etched your name into the record books by becoming the youngest ever woman to pass the New York bar? Have you ever imagined that you would achieve such an amazing feat?
I mean, it does feel really great. It was a surprise, I have to say. It's one of those exams where after you finish it, you're not sure how you did. And then there were months of waiting. So it was really wonderful to hear that, and it's been great since, and it definitely has changed the direction of my life. Looking back, even 3, 4, 5 years, I would never imagined I would be in this position. I never thought that I would well, for one, be working in the States, but also be actually actively pursuing an interest of mine and having used the bar exam as that stepping stone. But most of all, my reason in doing this and really publicizing my passing of the exam is that when I was going to sit for this exam, I didn't really have anyone who I could talk to. Like, I didn't have someone who I could speak to on LinkedIn, even with silly questions, or who had done it and who I could really like look up to, who was similar to me. And so that's essentially what I want to do for other students, for people who are fresh out of their LLB and who have absolutely no work experience, which is the position I was in, that this is doable and that you can do it because I did. And yeah, I worked hard, but I'm in no way some sort of legal genius or legal prodigy. Like, this is a doable path, and I'm here to show you how.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's very inspiring personally for me, and I believe I speak for many people when I say that, you know, it's been very motivating and inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of people out there would aspire to follow in your footsteps. And let me just say that, you know, what you're doing in terms of increasing accessibility towards the New York bar in particular has been just really awesome. So I suppose my next question to you is, how how do you think accessibility should can be increased, you know, in terms of candidates that really want to take the New York bar, or those who aspire to take the New York bar? What can be done to increase accessibility? Because from my own research, I've come to realize that for foreign students, especially who want to sit for the New York bar, they would have classes would be entirely online. You have, of course, you have resources like the Barbary Handbook and things like that. But I think to a certain extent, there is still, some things that are sorely lacking. So I think that's where you come in and, you know, promote accessibility and things like that. So it would be great if you could, give us uh, an insight on, you know, what on how accessibility can be increased in this particular respect.
Yeah, so it definitely, law is a very gatekept area of it's just an industry where lawyers help other lawyers, and if you're not a lawyer yet, it's really hard to get into. And that goes for every aspect of being a lawyer, whether that's getting admitted to law school or sitting the bar exam or getting admitted into a state. And it's very challenging. And so I'm here to tell people, for one, if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or if you have me on any other social media, like, ask me. But definitely there's more and more free resources out there. It's just, you do have to dig around and look. Barbary was such a help for me. Their entire course, I did their 6-month course, and as part of that, I recorded a lot of YouTube videos, which sort of tell you more about the course and the process. But everything's not out there in one simple sheet that you can just read and tells you what to do and how and when. And that makes it really difficult, because especially if you're a foreign student, you don't really know what to do and you don't know the order of things. And so I found Barbary to be a great help with that. And I think that's one thing people don't know, is even though they are a bar prep provider, they can help you with all aspects of it. So I had a lot of trouble sending in my documents to determine my eligibility to the New York Board of Law Examiners, and they were able to get me the help that I needed to get my documents sent and everything processed. And then they also provided resources for the MPRE, which is another exam you have to take after the bar. That's the professional responsibility exam. And they were really there for me every step of the way. And that's honestly, I will absolutely swear by that course forever, because it is the only reason I did so well. I didn't do any independent learning beyond what they gave me on the course. I didn't do any other research. I didn't buy any other books or do any other course. It was just what they gave me. So I really do think that they're a great starting point, and their website has a lot more than just how to sit the bar exam. It's a lot about like how to become a lawyer in New York. And they really are geared towards foreign students. So it's a really great opportunity if if you're looking to get into New York and practice law, like, go to one of their events. You can phone up one of their sales representatives. I worked as one of their sales representatives this past summer and the year before then, and that's because I really do swear by their course. So I absolutely think that should be the first starting point. And speaking of Barbary and increasing accessibility to law, I've decided to sit the SQE exam in July.
Okay.
So I've just started studying for that, and I'm really hoping that that is also something that will be more accessible to students, and it will really sort of streamline the path to becoming qualified as a solicitor in England and Wales without having to get a training contract offer.
Okay. I'm sure you would do very well, because
Thank you.
from your track record, I think you have been breaking barriers again and again. So best wishes to you. But again, for the record, I'd say that I'm sure, and many people I would say would agree with me when I say that you will pass the SQE with flying colors. Now, moving on to your role as an associate attorney at Whitmere IP Group, I'd just like to ask you, how does your typical day look like?
Yeah, so the joy of working in an IP boutique is that I actually get to see the work through. So as opposed to working at a really big firm where you just submit one piece of work product to a partner, then you never hear about it again. I've been able to be there for every step of the way, which has been really nice. So my typical day, it will depend. A couple weeks ago, we had depositions, in which case I would show up bright and early, print everything out, and we'd sit there and we'd take the deposition. And other days I come in to work and I'm just researching the goods and services for a client so that they can make an application for a trademark. Or other days I'm responding to office actions from the Patent and Trademark Office, which are like temporary refusals against a mark and require amendment. And other days it feels like I'm doing something super random that's completely unrelated to trademarks, like researching sanctions. And it really is very varied. And that's one of the things I like so much about working at a boutique, is that everything just comes through me eventually because I'm the youngest associate. So I get a little bit of a mix of work, and it's been nice because it means that I'm learning a lot. And I'm also learning a lot of things that I never thought I'd learn. Like the other week, I learned everything about generators for a client. And I didn't know anything about a generator before then. And there are some other clients that are, in different industries that I did some work on before. Like we have some fashion-based clients, but we also have clients that build rocket ships. So the work is different every day, which is it's really, really rewarding.
So you have talked about a variety of the work that you have done. Uh, so I suppose my question next is what are some of the most interesting aspects of your work? Now I understand that there are obviously confidentiality things at stake here, but we would be grateful if you could just give an overview about what are some of the most interesting things that you have done while you have been with the firm.
Yeah, so definitely sitting in on some of the litigation for trademark issues has been really fascinating. The most recent one I've been working on, it's in an industry that I'm completely disinterested in. It's not anything I'd ever even heard of or thought of before, but the actual work around the trademarks has been really fascinating. So I think that's something I would tell other young associates, is just because the client seems boring doesn't mean that the work actually will be. And so working through that has been really interesting, like being able to sit in through every aspect of a litigation process. And it's been really insightful into even just like the deadlines and the paperwork and the things that you never see on TV in Suits or anything. You don't see any of the behind the scenes. So being able to sit through all of that has been really interesting. And then also some of the clients have been really fascinating. We have a few clients who do like luxury items, and we have people who do generators and rocket ships and all sorts of things. That it's a very broad range of clients and very broad range of work. So probably one of my favorite parts is when I have to research competitors and just sort of seeing the differences. And so all of that's just been really fascinating for me, and every day has been really eye-opening.
Sounds really interesting. So, am I correct am I correct in understanding that no so like the work that you do every day is different, so there's not one day where you go to office and or in this case probably working from home, thinking that okay, today I'm just going to get by this day, so like you're going to get by the day which probably isn't, sorry, let me just rephrase that. So there isn't one mundane day. That's what I'm trying to get across. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I may have like a Monday morning,
Oh,
but usually by the afternoon, something exciting will come by my desk. It's great because I get to work with all of the partners, and they all have different clients and they all have very different work. And sometimes they'll just throw something at me and say, sort of like, figure it out. And so there's a lot of room for growth, which is great. There isn't that much hand holding, which is one thing that I think is very different from like a big firm versus a boutique, but it does mean that the learning curve is a lot steeper. So compared to 6 months ago when I was an intern at the firm, I feel like I've learned about 100 times over, and I'm so much better of a legal practitioner than I was then.
mhm. So you mentioned earlier about an aspect of the work that you have completed, which is in relation to trademark. So obviously, right now, I think that's a big issue as well because if we look at what's happening across the metaverse, we see that there is a burgeoning growth of trademarks. So, for example, McDonald's recently filed trademark applications for virtual restaurants and cafes. And just a couple of days ago, and this is the most interesting aspect in my opinion, the New York Stock Exchange actually filed a new trademark application to register the term NYSE for crypto and financial products and services. I suppose our audience is wondering, what prompted this bandwagon and what are the implications for brands across the world?
So I think that this is something that's been a long time coming, and I'm really surprised that this didn't start sooner. I mean, with the advent of video games and the ability to dress up your character or your avatar, like in Fortnite, being able to buy skins and accessories, and it's really just been a very quick progression in the past few months because of the media attention, I think, around Meta, especially, formerly known as Facebook. But I think that this is something that's important and will affect all brands, and it's important to get ahead of it because as a company, you're at the risk of having your IP misappropriated in the metaverse and not being able to defend yourself, essentially. And we've seen that with, I don't know if you've seen this recently, but Hermes was handed a loss because of the Meta Birkin. And because they didn't have a registration in that area, they were not able to protect their physical goods in the metaverse. So essentially, for a company, you need to start on this. You need to talk to an IP lawyer and get some trademarks registered. And this is not legal advice, so I'm not providing legal advice to your audience, but I do really think that if you want to get involved with NFTs or if you want to get involved in the metaverse, to do your research for one, but also it's inevitable. Like you do need to learn about it whether you like it or not. And as you mentioned with the New York Stock Exchange, real companies are getting very heavily involved. And I think it's important to be on the forefront of that rather than catching up 5 years from now. So I've recently worked with some clients who wanted to get their marks registered in the metaverse. And so for that, that's been drafting virtual trademark applications, which has been so interesting. And I'm definitely one of the first people, probably in Connecticut, to have done that. So it's really amazing to be at the forefront of that and also to be exploring really the bounds of the application for that. So we recently submitted some applications. We'll see what the Patent and Trademark Office says. It's really up to them what they will allow in the register. But making sure as a company that you're protected from all angles is obviously really important. And now being protected from all angles includes the metaverse.
Yeah, I suppose this is, one of the growing areas because as you have pointed out, there has been, substantial growth over the past few years, but recently, this quote unquote race has heated up because of the media attention that it has garnered. So I suppose that's something that's really interesting because I think probably a year or two ago, we didn't really hear about all of these, but suddenly it just cropped up after, Mark Zuckerberg and announced the transition towards metaverse. So that's probably something that will, dominate the legal news for the next couple of years. So we have
Absolutely.
spoken at
Absolutely.
length we have spoken at length about your academic journey, your career. So I'd just like to get your account on what are your interests beyond law.
So it's hard to have interests beyond law when you're a law student for one, but also when you're a law practitioner. You realize you spend a lot of time like looking for clients and reading about your work in your free time, and that's a good sign because it hopefully means that you love what you do. But for me personally, I've managed to find some other interests around the law. I really like to bake, so I've been doing a lot of that recently. It's which is really nice. I really like to indoor cycle, so I was really involved with Peloton over the pandemic, which was kind of fun. My mom and I would do that together, and yeah, I've been trying to read a little bit more recently. I've been reading Dune because I saw it in movie theaters, and I remember reading it back in the day when I was 11 or 12, and decided to read it again. Yeah, I've been trying to keep up some hobbies, and the SQE is now my most recent hobby. And hopefully in July that will no longer be a hobby.
Well, I mean that sounds really interesting because I think as much as we try to achieve our calling in our academic journey as well as our career later on, it's important to have something that you can look forward to. Because I think in life it's about having a good balance between your work and your interests. So I suppose it's really great to hear from you about your interests. So before we conclude the interview, I'd just like to ask you whether you have any final words for our audience.
Yeah, so if you are looking for a sign to sit the bar exam, take it from me, do it. My most important study tip is to stay organized and categorize. So for me, for studying for the bar, because it's separated into distinct subjects, I separate them into distinct subjects, and it worked for me. So if you're studying the bar right now and you don't know how to do it, just categorize, take a step back, talk to someone. And if that person is me, I'm very happy to help out anyone who's prospective bar student or who's really looking to pursue any sort of career in international law between the UK and the US.
So to those who are tuning in right now, make sure that you take note of that. So if you have any questions, so I believe Jasmine will be very happy to help out. So I think that concludes our interview for today. Thank you very much, Jasmine, for agreeing to do this interview. I'm sure our audience will benefit a lot from what you have just said. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.